Hi everyone, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and welcome to yet another podcast with a pure digital passion with Moses Kamibaro. Today I have Sajid Vayani from iColo's, which is a digital data center business, and we are here at the East Africa Com 2023, where they're hosting a room and also meeting potential partners and other activities. Thank you so much for joining us for the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Moses.
So I wanted to ask you, Saj, maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and as the sales director, what it is that you do at iColo's.
Sure. Do you have like an hour or so to talk about myself?
Yeah, just give me the highlights. Give me the highlights.
That's fine. So, born and bred in Nairobi.
Uh-huh.
I just to maybe preface this, I have no know-how. I haven't studied in IT. I haven't done anything.
Okay.
In fact, when I was in university, just growing up, I just did what my cousins were doing, which was accounting.
I
was really terrible at it.
Okay.
I had a passion for acting, tried pursuing that, and then sort of what happened was in the midst of me balancing between different jobs, I worked in Forex, I worked in the FMCG sector.
So very diverse, different experiences.
Yeah, I was just a kid looking for something to eat, man.
Yeah.
I had delusions of grandeur. I wanted to do acting. I wanted to pursue it. And to be honest, the reality of that was, it's a very tough industry to get into. So I said, let me just, whatever my cousins are doing, let me just go and
just plug in, yeah.
And Windies in Kenya, generally it's engineers or accounting. And so I wasn't good at any of that.
Yeah.
And just in between there, I happened to just get a scholarship that threw me off to the UK. And I did an MBA. And when I was there, it really, to the credit of I went to University of South Wales, to their credit, the teachers were amazing, the lectures were amazing. And I've never been that hooked in the education system before as I was in my MBA.
Really? Wow.
And really got me starting to think that maybe eventually I want to do something on my own, but just the aspects of business. Because a lot of these teachers, what happened was they owned their businesses.
Yeah.
And they're educating you on that. They basically sort of come from it from a personal experience. Anyway, master's was great. Managed to get my acting chops sort of just sharpened over there. But when I came back to Kenya, the first thing my dad asked me is like, all right, what's next? When are you starting to work? And just through networking events, I happened to connect with Ranjit Cherikov, who was the CEO and founder of iColo's Data Centers.
Okay.
And I started then, I thought the first interview was terrible, to be honest.
Yeah.
But then he returned to me with a job offer.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. So at that time, I started at the company as a management trainee.
Okay. So literally ground level, huh?
Ground level. So the company, iColo's was formed in 2015. I joined them a couple of months later in 2016.
Okay.
So towards the latter end of 2016.
So you've done a decent time there, yes.
Yeah, it's touching 7 years now. As you can see, the white hair on my beard. maybe it's time to move on to something else. But that being said,
yeah. So you started as a management trainee.
Management trainee, and I think for me, Ranjit was a fantastic boss, and just the hands-on approach he had with me really just molded me into who I am today. And I had direct access to a brilliant man, which in a startup sometimes that's the benefit. You're working with the core people of the company, whereas if you go work for a large organization, you sort of just a cog in the wheel.
Yeah,
so you don't get direct
but you have
access.
impact. You feel that you are adding value.
So as a management trainee, he noticed this guy likes talking a lot, man. Let's put him in business development and sales. And so then I got put in business development. Eventually, I got promoted to sales manager, and then now the sales director. So it's been an interesting journey. It's been very interesting seeing how iColo's has come this far. But yeah, that's just maybe a long-winded look into who I am as Sajid.
Well, thanks for sharing that. I really find this part of you, this acting piece, possibly plays a role in how you do your work.
Yeah, to be honest, sales is putting on a show. And so sometimes
it's a performance,
right?
It's
a performance, right? Just approaching it sometimes, you've just had a terrible day. Everything is there. But as soon as you see a client, I think just something comes into me.
Switch on.
I switch on, I put on a show. Even my colleagues are like, where did this come from,
Showtime.
And it's showtime. It's every time, it's showtime. And
yeah.
You just walk into it. So, I wouldn't have it any other way. I love sales. I love meeting people. It gives me energy, especially working in tech, to be honest, and the data center part of it, you get to see what's happening 2-3 years in advance. And you have know-how of where the industry is going.
Yes.
And so just when you meet people and they're talking about stuff that you're very well aware of, or you had a part to play in it, it's very rewarding.
Yeah.
And I think the data center aspect of it has definitely given me that satisfaction.
Do you feel that there was this is something I discuss with my own clients in my business and people I meet in general, but I think a lot of people find technology broadly very intimidating.
Yes.
I think the pandemic forced many people to adopt and adapt and become conversant with technology. But did you find, given your background, that there was a significant learning curve to get into tech, first of all, and then specifically this industry that you're in at iColo?
Right. I mean, so let's start at the very granular level. If we look at what the pandemic did for just a normal individual, my dad, who was never technology adept, all of a sudden he was approaching me to set meetings for him on Zoom.
Yes, there you
and
go.
The entire team of where he works with, they're all wazers. They've never used Skype
Yes.
and so on. Now Dad is technology proficient. You can't meet me? Fine. Let's set it up online. So just for the basic person, the move to some basic technologies like the medium of communicating with each other, everyone became so proficient at it. I think for us as a data center, what happened was a lot of people realized that if we can't access our facilities, if we can't access our offices, how do we know the environment is secure? And I mean, with God's blessings and things went really well for us, a lot of financial institutions realized the benefit of having a third-party secure location run and managed by an independent party. And maybe to that effect, if we look at the data center market, specifically with the enterprise and financial segments in Nairobi, one of my main questions to a lot of banks is, you have a lot of IT folks there.
Yeah.
Why are they running around looking for generators and cooling units when your core competency is banking?
Yeah.
You're not giving them time to innovate. Why is your engineer up at night trying to fix a cooling issue? So what we try to do is address that particular equation, is where we come in and take that headache away from you from the environmental perspective. We keep your lights on, we manage the cooling, we manage the security. You as a bank then focus on your core competency, which is banking. As a financial institution, maybe a health organization, don't have your IT team running around trying to manage your data center, the environmental aspect. Let them innovate, let them focus on your core competency. And it was an education. I mean, it was definitely, a steep hill to climb. Because when I started in the industry, a lot of these data centers were being run that were built 10, 15 years ago, and people are very attached to it. I had to walk around with a huge data center box and model to explain to the people and the colleagues in my industry that I met what the benefits were. And I mean, as a sales guy, I'm embarrassed to say this, but for the first 2 years, I didn't sell anything.
Wow.
Because I was selling a concept.
It is education more than anything, knowledge, information.
But imagine this, your boss is, and credit to Ranjit understood how tough it was, but any other sales guy, you'd be kicked out. I didn't sell anything. And that's made me realize there's an education gap over here. And so for 2 years, educating, meeting, networking, connecting. But when we had the product, the support we had from the community was amazing.
And I think that's part of the challenge, isn't it? And I think even earlier this morning, I was talking to a few other people who work in the DC space. For the audience, that's the data center space. That's the acronym used. And they said that one of the big challenges they see in the market is that the IT teams generally feel that they should own on-premise infrastructure for their technology, but also at the same time they see a risk that if they move these components away from their location, then potentially it could put their jobs at risk. And I think part of the challenge is that, isn't it? Getting over the fact that many might perceive this as a strategic infrastructure that they need to have in-house, whereas in actual fact it shouldn't be there if possible, right?
Yes, I agree. So, I mean, again, it's all down to education and what was in the market at the time. You see, a lot of the data centers that were originally there before us were retrofitted in warehouses.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you have a building, you slap a few generators, cooling units, UPS, and it's a generator. And for the most part, they worked, right? But there are some elements of scrutiny to the way they were designed.
Yes.
iColo was the first data center operator in East and Central Africa to do greenfield builds from the ground up. And with our parent company at the time, Interaction, which is now Digital Realty, they sort of have a data center Bible, right? They told us, listen, don't read the first 10 chapters, continue reading from here. Because through their history, they made a lot of mistakes, right? Which is normal as you're learning and growing from that. So we sort of came in with the education given to us that this is the way you build it and this is what works. And so when we set up those data centers, and that's, as a sales guy, I do not like doing presentations.
Yeah.
To hell with presentations. Let me show you the actual product. And every single time when someone comes and sees the data center and we walk them through it, they're either very silent because they're thinking, where the hell did this come from? Or they're very excited. But either way, the reaction is positive. And what I tell them, though, is if you can do it at this scale and you're a bank, why would you spend so much money investing CapEx, right? When you can go into an OpEx model. Why would you spend $2-3 million building a facility when you can come for $10,000, $15,000 a month. Use that money to invest it somewhere else that makes your business more efficient towards your end customer, right? Let us take care of that data center aspect. And education is a big part of it. So I would say Kenyans, we are very quick to adopt the technology. If we see something we like, we go after it.
Well, no, I've seen that over the years, even when I used to work many, many years ago at a company called Africa Online, Kenya, I remember, used to contribute, 50% of group revenue. At that time, I think Africa Online had a footprint in Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Swaziland, Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, Zambia, Zimbabwe, and Kenya produced 50% of revenue. So I think there's a propensity to adopt or acquire or utilize technology at a very high level in this market.
Agreed.
But I want to take two steps back because I think for a lot of the audience, maybe we're making assumptions that they understand what we're talking about when we say data center and so forth. And I think if we just go down two levels, I think there are two things I want to know. One is, at the most basic level, what does iColo do?
Okay.
Number two, what differentiates it from all the other data centers that are in the market or in the region or across Africa? And then maybe you can talk about the relationship between Digital Realty and iColo and how that is somewhat strategic going forward.
Sure. So let's take it two steps back. What we do is technically real estate, IT real estate. Co-location is what we do as a service. We sell you space, you come and put your servers there, we connect you to dual-powered routes, meaning you have uptime on both ends. We ensure the cooling is sufficient to cool down your equipment, which heats up. We give it in a level that's very secure, man 24/7, 365, in an undisclosed location. So ideally, what I'm doing is giving space for your servers. Now, if you look at any company that starts off, let's say company X today starts up and they have IT infrastructure at the back. In order for them to run that IT infrastructure, they need a rack, they need to place their servers inside the rack, they need it powered from two lines to ensure if one line is cut, it's down. They need generators backups, they need UPS, they need cooling to cool down the servers in order to ensure that always online ecosystem we're striving towards never goes down. But more often than not, if you're doing it in an office building that was not meant to be for data center spec equipment, you lose power. Your generators are never fueled up on time or generators have failure. So what we do is we build infrastructure that never shuts down. Right? So when you put your servers with us, and to that effect, I mean, we've had 100% uptime on all our sites since we launched, an achievement we're very proud of. They come, they put their servers in there, they're just paying me for the space and the power they use. And so we take that CapEx equation out and we give you an OpEx solution in an environment that essentially never goes down. So you can rest assured.
So how many locations? I mean, there's Kenya, is it Pan-African, or who are you?
Maybe what I can even do is just take a step back to see, maybe give you a history of where iColo is and how far we come. So the company started in 2015. Our vision was to create greenfield build data centers, tier 3 spec, but carrier neutral. And what I mean by that is we were not owned and operated by any telecom provider.
Okay.
Majority of data centers today, majority of data centers that were there were run and operated by telecom providers. So there are two ways to look at this. If you come as a customer, you're sort of signing a contract for colo and connectivity with one provider.
Yes.
If one of those elements go down, how do you sort of distinguish? The other side of things were from the ISP perspective, right? And it'll get to why we sort of opened in Mombasa. But a connectivity provider, let's say I'm an independent provider, if I go to a carrier site, how do I get access to customers? Ultimately, connectivity needs to spread to as many eyeballs as possible.
Yeah.
But if you're in an environment that's monopolized by the carrier, how do you spread your reach further out? So what we wanted to do was we open a carrier neutral facility. And at the time, I didn't know much about data centers. I don't have a tech background. So I asked Ranjit, why are we going and building in Mombasa? All the customers are in Nairobi. He's like, wait and see. So the logic behind that was Mombasa is actually considered the gateway to East Africa. If you look at all the undersea cables that bring connectivity to the region, they first stop in Mombasa and then work their way inland.
Yes.
But most of those cables are sitting in cable landing stations owned by carriers.
I see.
So in order for you to talk to them, there's a markup you have to pay. So the middleman charges was exorbitant. And so that's why connectivity was not far outspread as what we have.
Yes.
So imagine opening now a neutral data center at the source, at the edge, and then inviting everyone to come there and telling them, well, you can connect with each other. And the cross-connect, which is a connection from your rack to the endpoint, is not charged based on capacity. It's a flat rate of $100 a month.
Yes.
Whereas before it was 10, 15, 20, 30,000. It was exorbitant. So all of a sudden, a new provider can start up and get access to the source and start his own business and sell. So when we did that in Mombasa, we had a lot of support from the connectivity community, because the landlord is not competing with the tenant. If a customer comes and places their server with me, they need connectivity, and I give them to the providers on site. And what happens is the customer can now bargain with 30 different network providers, right? So imagine the price of connectivity went significantly down. And because of the presence of all the connectivity providers, a lot of these content people you use today on your apps, I'm not going to mention them, but you can check online.
Yeah.
All the big content providers noticed that the traffic was exceedingly well in Mombasa, and so they came and deployed edge equipment with us.
Okay.
Because now they have access to eyeballs. So a small ISP, let me take iNet Africa, for example, in Malindi. He can now go and speak to the large giants, content delivery networks of the Facebooks of the world, right, for $100 cross-connect. And he can now serve his community. So ideally what we're trying to do is improve the connectivity experience in Kenya. Why should it be very different from anyone outside? And most of the servers at the time for all these tech giants were outside Africa. So in order to get access to them, you have to go through a subsea capacity, maybe to London, maybe to South Africa, by the time it comes back. That's why, if you remember downloading a Facebook image in 2008, how long it would take. Now, fast forward, in a neutral environment, all those servers are in country, it's instantaneous. When you're using a network like Safaricom, you're getting free WhatsApp, Airtel, free YouTube. That's because stuff is now inside the country in a neutral data center where people can access it very quickly. So that was the logic with Mombasa, tapping into that market, not from a data center perspective, because technically we're selling real estate.
Yes.
But behind that, there's actually thought that goes into who we sell it to make the environment very attractive. And that was our strategy with Mombasa. Now we've launched our second data center in Mombasa, which are receiving all the new undersea cables, and this is accessible to the East African community. No middleman charges. I'm just selling my space. Then we obviously opened in Nairobi after our first Mombasa site. So that was our second data center. Yeah. And that was to tap into the financial market, the enterprise market, the government market, because a lot of them were running data centers that didn't work. They were giving them problems. And so what we told them was, we'll take that headache away from you, co-locate your facilities here, we'll manage the infrastructure, you guys run your business.
So what I'm hearing from you here is that these are two different markets, right? There's the ISP stroke content market on one side, then you have your enterprise space where a bank or an insurer is using their infrastructure with you.
But they're also interconnected. You see, the thing is, let's talk about banks for a second.
Yeah.
I mean, the move and the knowledge base in which they've sort of absorbed over the past few years is significant, how we've grown as a market. What I had for the longest time an issue is convincing a lot of institutions to put their disaster recovery site in Mombasa. Because if you come to think about it, Mombasa is a separate tectonic plate. It's got its own separate set of fiber, different power grid. The amount of people I've gone to in Nairobi, where their primary site is on the 5th floor and the disaster recovery site is on the 11th floor. In this day and age.
Are you serious?
Yes, and so, for me, it sort of then becomes an education perspective.
You've got to explain the risks.
You've got to explain the risks and all. In one building, and Nairobi is not prone to risks. I mean, Mondays and Thursdays a few weeks ago, you couldn't access your offices, right? I mean, those particular instances, if something happens to your primary site and your DR site is in the same building, what do you do as an institution?
Is that a basic that people should be knowing better?
Yeah, and that's exactly. So you see, the thing is, even from a policy perspective, we definitely have to narrow down on this. But that's not a blank canvas on all institutions.
Yeah,
a lot of them are now doing active-active, where it's no longer active-passive. They're upgrading their infrastructure, they're upgrading their sites, they're putting one in a colo facility, one in their head office. So the education as well.
It's maturing now.
It's maturing, and it's bound to get better. But you see, the thing is, now people are looking at Mombasa as a disaster recovery site. So those markets sort of are now intertwined. And from a connectivity content perspective, Nairobi is technically the Silicon Savannah of East Africa, right? A lot of people terminate here, and a lot of connectivity providers terminate here. So a lot of the content delivery, the connectivity, the IP transit providers are setting up POPs in these data centers to access those far-reach markets. The issue sort of for the longest time was the backhaul cost. You still have to get to Mombasa, there's a cost covered, but with the competitive element, like in our sites, we have 65 providers in our Mombasa site.
Wow.
Have you heard of 63 providers? I mean, not many.
Who are they? I don't even
exactly.
I wonder. Yeah.
And sort of all of them are now, the pricing we're getting from the smaller providers are even able to sort of throw back the big providers because they have direct access to these content folks.
It levels the playing field.
It levels the playing field, which is what we ultimately want, right?
Yeah.
Because as the internet should spread out as far out as possible. And so data centers are actually the cornerstone of the ecosystem for the internet to develop. You talk about cloud, you talk about everything hosted online. At the back end, there's a data center somewhere hosting those servers. That's how it works. And so for me, it was also an education gap. Imagine coming from an acting and accounting background.
No, I mean, that's a steep learning curve.
It's a steep learning curve. So credit to the way Alex and Ranjit ran the company. They took their time to explain to all of us, and they sort of grew us up in their shadows, and now they put us to the forefront. You guys now run these departments. You know what to do. You know how we work. And for the most part, it's the best job I've had. I mean, it's fascinating. So, but that's what we're trying to do. So we've launched our Mombasa 2 site recently, which is receiving the new undersea cables. We're now working on our Nairobi 2 data center, and that's now completely different. That's a completely different spec.
What changes?
So the size, first of all, but the reason behind it is, you see, Kenya has put itself on the map. So a lot of these sites that we build were for the edge platforms, the smaller requirements. So 300 rack facilities. Mombasa 2 is a bit bigger, 700 rack facilities, but Mombasa 1 and Nairobi 1 are similar. But what has happened is the hyperscales have taken very keen interest in Kenya. And
what's a hyperscale?
So the Microsofts of the world.
Okay.
Basically, I mean, East Africa is a key market for them. Africa is a developing market. From Asia Pacific to the Americas, all those large providers are sort of looking at us very actively, and they want to put up compute equipment in the country, which is hyperscale spec, which is from a size much bigger than anything we've dealt with before.
Wow.
And so that's how Nairobi 2 is specifically targeted. It is about 3,000 racks in size, whereas the previous data center was 300 racks. So you can see from a sheer scale perspective, it's very different. And we're very curious as to why there's a lot of interest in Kenya. And when speaking to, and that's why I love this job, is I get to speak to the source, the people at the other side of the app.
Yeah.
Is that in Kenya there was a huge trajectory that just completely blew everyone away. Because normally the way the internet is built, City A builds fiber and then extends to City B gets connected, then City C, and so on and so forth. But in Kenya that didn't happen, because outside of Mombasa and Nairobi the fiber is not that great. But data consumption was at all-time high. And we were like, why? And the answer to that is M-Pesa. M-Pesa put a phone in everyone's hand. If you come to think about it, you have a Maasai sitting in the Serengeti, living in a mud hut.
Yes.
He has a smartphone. He's on WhatsApp. He's paying his school fees via M-Pesa. He's on Facebook. You see, M-Pesa basically was the cheapest infrastructure to get out to everyone very quickly.
Yeah.
And so the spike in data is quite high. Given our population is about 50 million,
yes.
Imagine the maturity, because everyone is on M-Pesa, right? So M-Pesa phones now turned out to be smartphones, and those smartphones now had applications, Opera Mini, WhatsApp, and the data consumption from that perspective was very unique, because it's not happened in any other country, right? And so Kenya was to attribute for that. And I mean, we were in the Mara recently, and I had 4G connection. How brilliant was that? And there are no roads over there. You're in the midst of
4G.
Manasimbas over there, all these animals there, and we have 4G. I can FaceTime, I'm there. So that was very unique. That definitely just set us up differently. And so as an economy, when we get a lot of this stuff, the trajectory is in the positive direction, because connectivity will become cheaper. A lot of the edge stuff will sit, a lot of the compute stuff will sit in country. We don't need to go to another continent to access it. It's instantaneous. Latency is less. So we are facilitators for this connectivity growth, for this connectivity ecosystem. But technically, we're real estate. I'm just selling space and power.
So you're providing the underpinning infrastructure to make it all possible.
Yeah. And I mean, that's why data centers are a very sexy business right now. I mean, you've seen how many data center operators are coming up, right? But it's just part of the growth process. The amount of data centers we have globally is just unparalleled. Digital Realty as a company as a whole, I think we have in excess of 300 data centers around the world. And within Africa now, so maybe I can even just speak more about our relationship, because I know you asked that. So initially we got, we were working with a company called Interaction, who had a stake in us, and then Interaction was absorbed by Digital Realty. So we are now a full subsidiary of them. So within Africa, what happens is we have presence in South Africa through Terraco, which is the de facto data center in the region. I mean, they're the main guys. And then we have in West Africa, Medallion. So we sort of covered all the bases. But then also from a global perspective, we have South America, Asia Pacific, Europe.
Wow, it's big, huh?
And what happens is now, because we are part of this brand, if you have a contract with us in America, we can replicate those terms for Kenya, We just have to make a
same service levels, everything.
Same service levels. Whatever you have with our data centers here is basically what you would find in Amsterdam, in Paris, in London. So we're very proud of what we've achieved over here. In fact, I would encourage any of our listeners today, if they want to come and see the facilities, please get in touch with us. We're happy to show you.
So this is an interesting thing because we're here obviously at East Africa Com, which is a major conference for the telco space, cloud providers, infrastructure partners like yourselves. And I think for me, one of the key questions I wanted to get out of this conversation is what sets you apart? What makes you different from everyone else who seems to say they offer the same thing? Yeah, you're laughing, which means there's some specific details, right?
Obviously, having Digital Realty on board and interaction did set us apart from our technological know-how and the way we set sort of the data center up. Just from a technology perspective, I would say we're very proud of what we've done. They're very good data centers in Kenya, but I personally believe we're a step above and beyond that. And with our uptime records, 100% uptime on all our sites, that's a credit to what we've done. The second aspect is, I believe the carrier neutral aspect was very important because that gave us the support of the connectivity community. And if you have the support of the connectivity community, you have everyone else because everyone wants to be online. So if you have plenty of options to go online, that sets you apart. And then obviously at a human level, I think for the longest time, we were the guys just going around speaking to people about carrier neutral data centers. And we've developed this network of relationships that extend far beyond Kenya. And a lot of people have faith in what we're able to deliver. So I do believe at the human level, that sets us apart.
Fantastic. Where's the business going, in the next 2 to 5 years? Where do you see iColo going as a business?
So I do see Mombasa definitely becoming a global hub in terms of the connectivity landscape.
Yeah.
Specifically because of the new cables landing, the Peace Cable, the To Africa cable. Those are sort of like expressway routes of data coming into the country, and they will definitely significantly change the landscape. In terms of just the sheer size of our facilities, they're just going to get bigger and bigger because of the requirements. Everyone is moving online. I mean, I recently went to a friend's house and their curtains were connected to their phone and this and that.
The smart homes,
Smartphones, everything is sort of transitioning towards that. And even in the smaller sectors, connectivity is spreading its far reach to places that were not there before. Education systems are moving online. And it's just the back end of things needs solid infrastructure to support that. And we're no longer at a place where you can just build a 200 to 300 rack facility. You have to take into account a lot of the interest in Kenya, both from the Asia-Pacific market, from Europe, from North America, and beyond. We're definitely in a critical place. And Kenya, if something works in Kenya, it works in East Africa. And so from a data centers perspective, we'll definitely see a lot more data centers. iColo will definitely throw its hat in the ring with the hyperscale stuff that's coming in. But Mombasa is very interesting. I think Mombasa too will definitely set Kenya apart, especially from the connectivity and content front.
So 2 things I'm hearing is that 1, it's going to be more data centers, but also the kind of data centers need to cope with the future anticipated growth, what we call the next normal. Yeah. So from that perspective, you're really building for the future. You're building today, but you've got to be ready for 5 years, right?
But the thing is, I mean, as much as people are building data centers, one thing to note is it's also very tricky business. I mean, I know it's the new kid on the block. Everyone wants to build data centers. But if you just look at the main cost to us, which is power, power has gone up significantly.
Oh, yes. Then you got the dollar issue as well.
Exactly, right? I mean, so it's becoming sort of less of an attractive business, but people yet are doing it. If I were to put my money somewhere, my 2 cents, I would put it in renewable energy. I would invest in renewable energy because that's what data centers are going to become. Basically, data centers, as I mentioned,
they're power hogs, right?
Yes, they're power hogs, and they are what support the internet at the back end.
Yes.
And so, if there's a way to reduce the power cost, which is all constantly going up, I think that's where the bank is.
So, clean energy will be a big factor going forward.
Big factor, and to that effect, Kenya has a lot of green energy. I think 90%. Maybe don't quote me on this, but 90% or so.
We've got massive solar, wind, hydroelectric, geo.
So it's quite big, and so we're quite green here. But then solar is where I see a lot of things transitioning, or some form of renewable energy which will just save your cost of power, and I'd invest my money there.
Great. So maybe just to wrap up, maybe you have some final words or thoughts around iColo and maybe the broader requirement for data centers and what it is that you do.
I mean, I'd say that First of all, it's good now. I mean, with this East African Com as a reference, it's good to walk into a place where people are very familiar with what you do, very confident, and have trust in your ability to deliver services. Before, we had to come in and introduce ourselves. So maybe beyond that, now we want to sort of go to a global scale where everyone knows who iColo is through the Digital Realty company. We're definitely trying to put ourselves on the map. It's an exciting future. I mean, things are just in this particular industry, things are constantly evolving, and we're just hoping to sort of be the support of wherever the industry is going on the backbone.
Saj, thank you so much for joining us for the podcast. To the audience here on the Pure Digital Passion, that's Saj coming from iColo, an incredible company doing amazing things on the ground, making the internet that we consume and use every day possible, with a very interesting proposition that is really scaling up and able to meet the needs of the environment. Thank you so much.
Asante sana ndugu. Thank you so much, bro.
Okay.